Tonight, the Amtrak disaster in Philadelphia exposing how Washington is a train wreck when it comes to things like rail safety. We're going to tell you about all the lapses. Then, as tensions rise between police officers and many communities, we will talk to the head of the White Plains Police Department and ask him how things are looking from his beat. Also, a big controversy involving ABC's George Stephanopoulos. He donated $75,000 to the Clinton Foundation, but didn't tell anybody about it. And you'll remember, he also grilled the author of that book, slamming the foundation's finances. Well, it's got a lot of people questioning now the anchor's objectivity. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French, and we're going to start with new questions arising today about that Amtrak disaster. 8 people, as you know, were killed when the New York-bound train derailed after hitting a curve at more than 100 miles per hour. The speed limit, as a frame of reference, was 50. And today, we are learning it accelerated to 70 to 100 in the minute before the crash. And we're also learning the train and the tracks didn't contain some safety features that could have helped prevent this whole thing from happening in the first place. One of them, an automatic speed control system. The train actually had it, but it wasn't activated. Congress ordered all their installation in 2008, but lawmakers, they've been failing ever since to cut through all the red tape and just to get these things operational. Also, the northbound track that the train was traveling on didn't have an automatic braking system, but the southbound tracks did have it. Try making sense of that. Many people are blaming a lack of federal funding for all the shortcomings, and House Speaker John Boehner, he's not buying that.
There's been some criticism, even from Democrats, that Amtrak was not well funded enough and that Republicans have.
Are you really going to ask such a stupid question? Listen, you know, they started this yesterday. It's all about funding. It's all about funding. Well, obviously, it's not about funding. The train was going twice the speed limit.
All right, I want to bring in our panel right now Dominic Carter, political journalist and author, Richard St. Paul, Republican strategist and former vice chair for the National Black Republican Association, and Andrew Whitman, our senior political correspondent. And Andrew, I'll get to you. Obviously, the investigation in the beginning phases right now, but we do know a few things, that this train going way too fast here. And we're also learning that there's no uniform code of safety, as it turns out. We have all these suggestions, all these possibilities, but depending where you are on certain paths on this train, you're going to get more security than you're not. How much of this, from what we know now, can you attribute to dollars and cents, operator error, and oversight?
Well, look, we don't know what caused the crash. We don't know why the train sped up from 70 miles an hour to 100 miles an hour in the minute before the crash. We don't know if that was a mechanical issue. We don't know if that was a computer issue. We don't know if that was an operator issue, or if there's something that the engineer did that was wrong. So the specifics of this exact crash, yeah, we don't know. We still don't know. But if there are systems in place that could stop something like that from happening, from becoming a fatal crash, and we do know that we do know. We know it exists. We know the technology is available. We know it just hasn't been installed yet, and part of that is money, and part of that is oversight, and part of that is bad regulations. So there is definitely a systemic component to all of this that can help overcome the shortcomings of any sort of operator error. And let's be honest, if there was some way of stopping that Metro North crash or the Spuyten Duyvil crash that we had, the same kind of automatic braking system, there would be people who were alive who died in that crash. If you could figure out a way to, make it so that mechanical error couldn't stop, or could stop plane crashes, or could stop car crashes or truck crashes, we would be wise to invest in that technology.
And we're not talking about science
lives.
fiction here, Richard. These things exist. Depending on if you're going north or if you're going south, there were different safety protections for you. Depending where you were along the route, this would have triggered an automatic stop or not. It's crazy to me, and I think crazy to the audience at home, that depending on where you are, on what rail you are, you'll get more safety than where you're not. This just seems so backwards, and I know Boehner was mad, but at this point, it is fair to say that when you talk infrastructure and funding, it becomes a boogie word here, and one party says, oh, that's pork barrel wasting and spending, and the other one says you ought to do it. Shouldn't we just make sure the bridges and the roads and the trains and stuff work in this country?
Well, there's no doubt about it. We have a long way to go in terms of properly funding the infrastructure. But in this particular matter, I would blame Amtrak. The Northeast Corridor is their most profitable line. It makes over $500 million in profit. 18% of the population uses it. That means over 200 million people a year use that line. There's no reason why that shouldn't be the safest rail passage in all Amtrak's rail. It really is Amtrak taking too long to implement the, I believe it's positive train control that would have slowed down the train. In this sense, as Boehner said, he's correct. Funding had nothing to do with the implementation of this. Amtrak could have done that. They just took too long through their bureaucracy to do it.
I would argue that it doesn't have to be profitable. I mean, you talked about this no profitable line. Yeah, it's the line that has the most riders and that makes the most money. A national train system, I don't think is something that needs to be profitable. It doesn't need to make money. It's a public service to everybody. It should be subsidized. It should be lower cost.
It is subsidized.
You know what, though, Dom?
$45 billion subsidy.
If there's a car
in 44
that,
years.
Gets into a same spate of similar mechanical problems that end up in fires when people are trying, or ends up going forward when they're trying to put it in. We have agencies that regulate it. There'll be lawsuits, of course, they'll be attached to this. There'll be fines. We heard from the CEO of Amtrak, they take account of it, it's unacceptable. But we also have the government for things like this. And I know the government becomes a dirty word lately, but who else but the government can police rail safety? Andrew rattled off a whole bunch here. You can even add to it gate crossings and stuff like that. I'm not saying one company is to bear all the responsibilities for this, but isn't that what we have a government for, to make sure that they're not cutting corners, to make sure that the northbound gets the same treatment as the southbound, for crying out loud?
A government that's going to hold Amtrak responsible. My question.
And not take their word for it, but to enforce safety codes.
Of course. Yeah, I'm so glad that you mentioned regulatory issues as it relates to other things. So let's take a car, for example. Maybe I'm the only one that's noticed this, but have you noticed that in the last couple of years, it seems tougher and tougher to automatically rubber stamp the annual inspection for your vehicle? So the Department of Motor Vehicles can crack down on that to the degree of, if your check engine light comes on, you're not going to get your sticker as it relates to your vehicle. And so now we have a train with 200 people on the train, and you led the show with this. We have software that will override human error, and it's not put in yet.
Could you imagine if it was one of our loved ones that was the 8 people on that train? And whether it was an idiot, whether he fell asleep, whether he was playing with his cell phone, I don't know what happened. It's not important, though. The train shouldn't have gone that fast, and it just irks me. Now, I'm telling you, we've talked about bridges on this program at different times here. We saw the collapse in Minnesota. We talked about, look how hard it was to get the Tappan Zee. We still don't even know how we're going to pay for the thing, right? I mean, we fight over stupid things in this country when they are basic necessities like transportation.
Rich,
for crying out loud.
I'm as much of an optimist when it comes to what government can do and where we can go as a country and all. I'm really like at a wit's end when it comes to the infrastructure, because we're debating how to keep our stuff at current level, at current operating level. We're looking at the Tappan Zee Bridge right there. We're trying to replace it just so we have another bridge that actually stands and doesn't collapse. We're talking about keeping our let's be frank, our lousy commuter train system up and running.
I guess my only point is, I'm not
better.
asking for the moon. I'm just saying, you want to have your license to operate? We're going to see, you have till whatever date, that we're going to check the train. If at any point along this route the train exceeds the mile, with us doing a demo over 50 miles an hour or whatever the limit is, you're going to be fine. We're going to shut down the rail until you fix it. Magically, as you say, a $500 million net profit in terms of an operating line here for them in the Northeast Corridor, it's going to magically work, I have a feeling. But nobody's putting their feet to the fire. I don't know if it's funding. I don't know if it's oversight, but we can do better than this. By the way, just one piece of news here. Dominic Carter. Little love for DC last night. He was an MC. I got to sit in the crowd here. He was an event here for the Hudson Link, which is an organization we've talked about quite a bit in this program. Non-taxpayer money, private funding, educating inmates behind bars. Most important thing is when these guys get out, they have a near zero recidivism rate. It was a great thing, and honestly, Dominic was terrific. Kudos. Flirted a lot from the stage there, but that's, I guess, part of the charm. All right.
I was great on the show last night.
You were fantastic. Oh, there you go. A little love. Right.
Somebody had to work.
Yeah.
Get involved in our conversation right now here. Before I get nauseous, go over to Facebook and Twitter and sound off on our question this evening. Is partisan politics, in your eyes, to blame for the lack of funding and oversight for the rail safety? Is it Exhibit A with what's wrong with what's going on? All right, we come back. A bunch of political issues, including that guy, George Stephanopoulos, in hot water for donating to the Clinton Foundation, but not coming clean about it. Is this a big deal here, or was this just minimal oversight. We're going to get into that either way. I'm sure Mr. St. Paul's got something to say on that.
Yeah.